Hello everyone, welcome to Durrett's Take. There's a lot I want to go with today, so let's get started. Oh, by the way, so usually I only do about 2 a week now, but now I might decide to go back to 3, maybe even 4 podcasts a week since there's a lot of news and big news, whether it's college football or NFL level, because that's going to be starting up soon. So, and with the basketball playoffs coming off in the NBA, so I just might be doing more podcasts this week. So let's get started. So I mentioned in my podcast the other day with Nebraska how they may be trying to play other teams this fall, and how dumb I thought that idea was because they wouldn't be able to leave the Big Ten for that. But Nebraska came out recently and they said they're not going to pursue this option anymore. Now, I feel like the message from the Nebraska press was kind of like a "okay, fine, we'll behave" like type of attitude. But in the end, I was right that Nebraska wasn't going to do it, neither will any other teams in the Big Ten. They're content with just trying to pull off spring football. So I was right about that. And then also, the stat came out yesterday that 0.46 of the NFL tests so far out of over 100,000 that have been tested got COVID. So while I believe there will be positive tests like baseball, and if this number cannot go over a full 1% or hopefully decrease over the next few months, then the NFL I feel like we'll definitely have a football season. It'll be completed just fine. Again, colleges. This is why colleges should try to play. If there's one player on a college football team that gets COVID, well, it sucks for that person who got COVID, and you want to make sure he doesn't affect the rest of the team. It's like, move on. It's just one player. Now, if it's multiple players, that's where you can kind of have an issue, and then obviously if it becomes an outbreak, like maybe Marlins, then that's a real issue, and you just have to postpone or cancel. But I feel like if it's just one person, every once in a while the team gets it, or maybe just a few, then I feel like it's again, it sucks for players, and hopefully they don't suffer any health problems from it. I feel like it's fine. You can pull off the season, so that's why I feel like the NFL, if the number stays like this for the season, I feel like the NFL will definitely be able to pull off the full season. So recently, a lot of other conferences are not only canceling football, but canceling just fall sports in general for the full 2020 year, like volleyball and soccer and the first half of basketball, for example. And I understand because those sports don't matter in the grand scheme of things compared to football. But right now, I do want to focus on college basketball because, while again, it doesn't bring as much money as football, I feel like college basketball is important. You telling me Duke, Kentucky, Gonzaga, especially with no football, you tell me those sports don't matter for these type of programs? Newsflash, it does. So I know they're going to try to pull off something to the best of their abilities. But as far as different scenarios of how to pull off a college basketball season, I came up with 2 different strategies. One, this one I'm not really caring for, but just it makes most sense. But just do conference only. But the way I want to specifically have conferences participate in the bubble-like format. So you get tested every other day, you're in a neutral location, you're there for 2, maybe 3 months. And while that's going to be tough on the students, it's a sacrifice they're going to have to be willing to make. And then if it's and I do acknowledge that it's going to cost money, obviously. So if there's a conference that they can't afford that, then they can just stick to either traveling within the conference to play, or just not have a season in general. But that's up to them. So then you would go on with March Madness around middle of March, end of March, as usual type of thing. But the reason why I don't like this idea is because there's going to be teams that they need a non-conference schedule in order to kind of build up their resume for the committee. Because, for example, if we're to do conference only, then Gonzaga ain't going to be a typical 1 seed this year because their schedule's so weak. Because the only other good team in the WCC, I think this season will be BYU. Because St. Mary's will decline. Pacific, I feel like, will decline. I just feel like it's not going to be as good of a conference as it was last year. Whereas the ACC, for example, typically has around 7 teams that make it to the tournament, so their strength of schedule is going to be really good. So I feel like that's going to be a factor, which is why I feel like non-conference games do matter for college basketball, unlike college football. So that's why this will lead me to my second option, which is, since the season's delayed, just start the season like you would in October, but obviously you start it in January, and then Instead of March Madness, have May Madness. Postpone the tournament till May. I feel like that. I feel like that will work just completely fine, assuming the coronavirus can hopefully die down by then, type of thing. We can get something going. Like, I wouldn't mind watching March Madness in all May. Like, I doubt anyone else would mind that either. But like, I wouldn't mind it. Nothing's going on much in May, anyways. Especially with the different NBA season. I'm not sure how if NBA season is going to continue on in May. Or they're going to try to end it early, like I heard. So I feel like May Madness work out just fine. Now, things that are being discussed is maybe like 20 teams in one bubble, 20 teams in another bubble, or something like that. And have like 2 or 3 bubbles, and have teams get invited to those bubbles, and that's pretty much it for your non-conference. And you play in there for 3 weeks, like in December or January or something, before you start conference play. And I get why they're doing it, because it's a safer atmosphere stuff, and I like the idea. But it's not fair to teams that don't get invited to play in a bubble to be of their non-conference schedule. So that's one reason why I don't feel like that won't work. But we'll see what happens. So now, as I mentioned in my last podcast, I talked about I was going to bring up FCS teams, and I'm going to do that now. So speaking of FCS teams, I want to go on a quick rant about them. So most FCS leagues are now in spring football mode. There's a few that says maybe you can play an FBS team, non-conference type of thing. As far as conference only type of thing goes, it's going to all be in the spring. So there was a college football analyst that came up with this idea, and I have to mention that the college football analyst for ESPN came up with it because I don't want to take the full credit for it. But I do come up with credits with like different reasons why it should happen and why I agree with him. He says the FCS team should permanently move to the spring and play in the springtime. So for me, a lot of people say spring's January to March. For me, I would say spring's more February to April type of thing. But I thought about it, and like I said, I think it sounds like a good idea. And here are my reasons to back up. So one, a fan might say, excuse me, the draft is in April. That's a quick turnaround from the end of the spring to the NFL draft. How is that going to work? I will admit, yes, that's a quick turnaround. How many FCS players get drafted each year? 5% maybe 8% on a fluke year type of thing, like, and then a few obviously may get free agent contracts type of thing, but just like not all get drafted, so it's not going to be a huge impact in the grand scheme of things. Then there's the argument that's a short turnaround from a college season to a professional season. Again, true, but let's be honest with ourselves. If anyone can handle a quick turnaround, it's an athlete in their early 20s. Also, the few FCS players who do get drafted are hardly ever first-year contributors anyways, so they won't be playing much on the field, so therefore they'll get some rest. There's a difference between practicing for year-round versus playing games for year-round. Then with spring football, there's a bonus. We don't have to see an Alabama versus a Murray State each fall. I hate those games. I understand why they have those games, because those small schools, like a Murray State or whatever, they need a big payday. So I understand in that regard why those games are important. And so I understand where you're coming from. But again, and my solution to this is that an FBS team can play an FCS team like an exhibition for their spring football game. Because I'm tired of having spring football, especially the ones that end up getting televised. Like, it's just their team versus their own team, and it's mostly third stringers type of thing. But if like Nick Saban, for example, if he wants to really see what he has in his team during the springtime, then play an FCS team who will be playing during the spring. I feel like that would be much better spring football content than because for me, I'd rather see like a Georgia versus a Northern Alabama type of thing in the spring. There's not as much football going on in the fall. It just makes sense. And then the one more argument is that, hey, who cares about FCS teams anyways? We don't watch them. Who cares? This is true. If you have a choice between NFL, FBS football, and FCS football, you're going to choose the first two all day. However, the NFL never plays in the spring. The FBS, I mean, this is the special year, but usually they're not going to play in the spring. So with no other football on besides maybe XFL, the FCS teams can play then and get their exposure that they need, and with that exposure and TV revenue time, all that, then they could put on better content on the field, and they could be pretty entertaining games to watch. So it's basically just more football year round, which, as a football fan, I'm down for that. I feel like a lot of football fans would be down for that. For example, before the XFL shut down, I felt like the XFL was good because it was more football during springtime. Yeah, it's not going to be the same type of level as the NFL's. Same with FCS, it's not going to be the same type of level as FBS football is. But hey, it's more football. Who wouldn't want more football? So I doubt the FCS teams and say, well, I doubt they'll make this a permanent thing. But it's fun to think about, and this is something that they should definitely consider. So I'm going to go over my NBA predictions next week, so I want to kind of see who gets in the play and how the play-in goes type of thing over the weekend. So I promise that will come next week. And thank you very much for listening to my podcast today. Please subscribe to my channel, let everyone know about me. Thank you very much, and y'all have a wonderful weekend.